Thank you. Good evening. My name is Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Airport Commission Chairman. Welcome to the February 14th, 2023 Airport Commission meeting. This meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. I'm not going to go through each person. I will just say this meeting is being convened by video conference via the Zoom app. The meeting will be aired at a later time on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. All supporting materials have been provided to members of the body, available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, and then we will take comment. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and speak clearly in a way to help generate accurate meeting minutes. Please speak through the chair. After members have spoken, I will forward the public members to speak. You have to use your full name for Zoom access, and each vote in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda. Again, a reminder, the meeting is being both audio and video recorded. And we are missing a couple of commissioners. Hopefully they join here soon, and we'll recognize them if I see them enter the meeting. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns with the agenda as published?
No.
Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. And we have the minutes of December 13th and January 10th, 2023 for review and approval. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns with those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those two sets of minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. If we could note that Commissioner Buscarin has joined us. Welcome, Mr. Buscarin. We just approved the minutes, so we're just up to item 2C on the agenda. Good. And we're going to move forward with ratifying the warrants of January 18th and February 8th. Any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, is there a motion to ratify?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Are there any items, are there any public comment for items which are not otherwise on the agenda? Please raise your hand virtually or wave at the camera and I'll recognize you. Not seeing any. So we will move on to item 4, which is introduction of the owner's project manager for the terminal optimization project and crew quarters. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Noah and then Mr. Cox, Mr. Carberg, and then Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to introduce Bill Cox. He is the Senior Project Manager at CHA Companies. Bill is the owner's project manager for the crew quarters and terminal optimization projects. You've heard me reference the OPM many times, and you will over the next 2 years. And since it's always good to put a face with a name, I asked him to be present today and provide a brief introduction himself. So, Bill, I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Chairman Gasparo. And we're really excited and looking forward to partnering with you on these projects. You know, I myself have an affinity for the airport and have been a base customer there for many years. And I think we've got some exciting times ahead with some of these planning. We had our contract awarded at the last airport commission meeting, and we really appreciate that. We've had several meetings with Noah in the meantime, and we're looking forward to supporting you. And we're here for any questions that you might have. Joe Sullivan is my executive project manager. He's on too. So we're, again, very happy to be working with you and excited about some of these upcoming projects.
Thank you. Nice to meet both of you, and likewise look forward to working with you as well. I agree there's a bright future ahead, and I think we're going to make some great improvements here by working as a team.
Absolutely.
Have anything else? Okay. We'll look forward to continued relationship with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Carberg, next item for Lawrence Lynch Corporation Taxiway Echo price adjustment request.
All right, thank you. So I'm presenting to you a price adjustment request made by Lawrence Lynch on the Taxiway Echo project. I've asked for Nick Darris from Jacobs to be present as the consulting engineer. We also have Rob Gent and Chris Lynch for Lawrence Lynch. I'm going to give a brief administrative review, and then I've asked Jacobs and Lynch respectively to briefly provide more background and information on the project phasing and reimbursement requests. So in my own view, I'll start off, and I have a screen share for everyone as well. So in my view, this has been a successful project with good professional oversight provided by Jacobs and a quality product delivered by Lawrence Lynch, and a safe and fiscally sound implementation by airport staff. The issue we're discussing is due to the discovery and requirement that we characterize PFAS-containing soil before proceeding with the Phase 3 area. This is the Phase 3 area, since the Runway 6 approach was historically used as an AFFF exercise site. Mass DEP required characterization of soils in this area. This phase 3, was scheduled for reconstruction in the spring season of 2021. Instead, Phase 3 was constructed in the spring of 2022, while Phase 5 instead was constructed in the spring of 2021. We subsequently received a repayment request from Lynch in June of 2022. Since we're administering an FAA discretionary grant with a state share, we approached these agencies. FAA and Mass DOT viewed this matter as an escalation cost, which is not an eligible funding cost. This was documented in a December 2022 reply from Jacobs to Lynch, which is in your packet. While I'm sympathetic to the inflation issues raised by Lynch, my initial concern was that an attempt to accommodate Lynch's request raised issues for the airport of precedent, eligibility, and appropriateness of a method of disbursement for airport funds. There is also a request letter from Lynch in the packet as well. With that, I was going to cede the floor to Nick Darris from Jacobs, and then to two gentlemen, Bob and Chris from Lawrence Lynch.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chair Gasparo and members of the commission. Noah, thank you for the time. My name is Nick Darris. I work for Jacobs Engineering Group. We're the engineer and the construction administrator for this project, as Noah alluded to. Noah, thank you for the overarching update and for sharing on your screen. I think the visual gives a great representation of the fact that essentially we had to trade the two construction areas at each end of the airfield for PFAS reasons. It was not for any condition that the contractor, the engineer of the airport brought to bear. That was just a matter of how we had to construct the project to stay within our environmental requirements. So I guess the points that I would like to convey, in addition to what Noah has already stated, is that Lynch delivered this project in a professional manner, on time and under budget. They were a good teammate, and they did not administer or state that there was any hardship to reallocating and doing this work out of season during the construction project, which was appreciated because administratively and environmentally our hands were slightly tied. So we certainly appreciate them working with us professionally in that manner. Within the packet, there's essentially a statement of how Lawrence Lynch arrived at their funds, and I'll allow them to speak to it, but I believe the format that they followed shows how other divisions within the Department of Transportation allow for payment. So it was not a process that they came up with on their own. They followed through basically what amounts to an escalation calculation that is pursued through departments of transportation or the Commonwealth with their Department of Transportation brethren. But as Noah stated, the FAA and Mass DOT from the aeronautics side elected not to participate in any additional funding. The only other item that I would like to add before I allow Bob and Chris to have their moment to speak as well is that we have a couple of questions that we're still basically discussing with Lawrence Lynch. So the dollar value that is currently shown, the way that I would imagine we would proceed, Noah, is that Jacobs would write a letter with a final determination and a dollar value for reconciliation if so decided by the commission, and that would be then decided on at a future board meeting. This was more of a bringing the issue to bear. Would you say that that's correct, Noah?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm happy to answer any questions from the commission, or we can proceed with allowing the representatives from Lawrence Lynch to speak.
Commissioners, anyone have any questions for Mr. Darris?
No.
All right, let's continue, please.
Very well.
Good evening. It's Chris Lynch from Lawrence Lynch Corp, and thank you for having us this afternoon. I'm gonna start with an explanation, and then I'll ask Bob if he has any additional input he could share with you. But the request is simply that when we bid the job was to be constructed over 5 phases during 5 different construction seasons. And with that, we assumed all risk required to build that job per the contract documents per those phases. At some point during the project, for reasons outside of our control, we were asked to swap, as was described earlier, phase 3 to the back end of the job. Phase 3 was the largest phase, in place of phase 5. Again, we simply said, as we did throughout, that yes, we're happy to make that swap for them. And at that time, when we made that swap, we would not have known that we would, during this period, enter the energy crisis, which we did. So after the phases were changed, we went out and completed the project, which made the largest phase, the last phase, during the remarkably unprecedented high energy cost. So what we have requested is we would like to be reimbursed for the delta in the energy cost from what it was during when we should have done phase 3 to what it is when we had to build phase 3. And we asked for those increased energy costs only on the quantity and volume of work that was larger than the phase 3 volume. So in other words, we didn't ask for increased energy costs to build phase 3 in the phase 5 spot. We simply said, because this phase is so much larger, and because the energy costs are so much more significant, we'd like to be reimbursed for the delta, for the extra work, for the extra volume that took place during these high energy costs. So we didn't ask for additional labor for those extra work hours because of that swap, which, let's face it, everyone got pay increases over that period of time. We didn't ask for extra per diems or anything else, simply the energy cost to reimburse us for what it cost us in addition to what we bid to build the job, because we went out of sequence with the phasing. Certainly, I'm prepared to answer any questions. Bob, if you have anything you'd like to add to that to further clarify our request, go right ahead.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you. Robert Gent, Lawrence Lynch. The only thing I would like to add is that since the beginning, this seems like everybody's looked at it like it was a escalation of cost, which we understand these airport jobs do not have escalation clauses in them, and this never was that. We use that format to come up with the value just because it's the fairest format we have that everybody would understand. So this really, it's additional cost, but it isn't about an escalation.
Thank you both. That was very helpful information, and to, further understand beyond simply, the letters that you provided were helpful, but I appreciate that explanation as well. Commissioners, do you have any questions with respect to this request? It seems to me
much
I'm sorry.
How much money are we talking about?
Mr. Carberg, and could we stop sharing the screen, please? It's a little bit easier to see everybody. Thank you.
Nick, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was $120,000 in rough numbers.
Yes, sir. The amount that was requested by Lynch in the letter was $120,000. There are a couple of questions that we wanted confirmation clarification on, but that is the dollar value that was originally requested. Yes.
My recommendation would be that we take this under advisement and further work with staff and council to see if there's a possible resolution to this matter, especially with a better understanding. I think the explanation from the contractor's perspective of how in fact it does differ from escalation, while it might be similar. Perhaps there is a way that we could further explain that to, FAA with respect to possible reimbursement there, as well as our own council, and then put this on a future agenda to, deliberate as a commission once we have alternatives from our own staff and council as to action items that could be taken, would be my suggestion. But it is on the agenda right now, and the commission can go where they may want to go with it. So I don't know if anyone else has anything else they'd want to add or defer it to staff and council.
I agree with Arthur.
I do too.
Okay. Ms. Planzer, does that sound like a reasonable approach?
Yes, I was trying to find my unmute.
Okay.
So,
Again, I thank you all for your time. Fully appreciate and understand your position. We appreciate the partners that we have with the Lynch Corporation and all the great work you've done for us. And let's see if we can't work this out in some way and get back to you. Do you have any?
Again, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
thank you.
With that, we'll move on to the continued public hearing. I do have a statement. This is the public hearing on rates and charges, which was continued from the last meeting. I just need to pull up remote meeting script, public hearing statement. Thank you. Welcome this evening. We're continuing the public hearing from January 10th, 2023 on proposed changes to the Nantucket Memorial Airport rates and charges. We'll revisit section 1.1.j from the proposed rates and charges and discuss the following: defining the law enforcement officer, so-called LEO reimbursement method. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, following up as an outcome from the January meeting, I've appended in the packets revised version of the rates and charges, reflecting those changes that were adopted in January, as well as my preferred language for the LEO reimbursement. That would be on page 2 of the rates and charges under section J. I'll share my screen, but I can take that off very quickly if you would like. What I have done is I have gone back to our airline stakeholder group and presented them with 6 different options and solicited their feedback. I believe we received feedback from Delta Airlines, from JetBlue, and American Airlines. Based on the combination of their input and staff comments, my recommendation was option 6, which set a rate of 39 cents per in-plane passenger for the reimbursements. the same strategy as item 4. I did like same strategy as option 4. I did like option 6 as far as expressing it in a per in-plane passenger rate, knowing that we do have the ability for future rates and charges to adjust this per in-plane passenger rate if we needed to. The other item I have is a clerical correction to page 5, item 6-F. Staff picked this up in a revision. The preheater electrical outlet supply should read as written $50 per use for a max 8-hour period. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions on the text or on the options as set forth in the packet.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions, further discussion on the currently proposed or as revised rates and charges? Okay, open it up to the public. Are there any public comments related to the pending rates and charges that are being contemplated? Please, maybe if we could stop the screen share, please, I'd be able to see, and then I could see that I have the participant list open, so you could raise your digital hand, or if you have your camera on, just give a wave. I'm not seeing any. And so is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
aye.
and chair votes aye. So it's to the commission now. Any further discussion, or is there a motion to adopt the rates and charges as proposed?
I'd move to adopt the rates and charges as proposed.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. Thank you all. Thank you to staff for catching those edits and everyone's collective work on that. With that, we will move on to the pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1. Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for Boyan. I believe it gave her 3 last-minute additions to the packet for this month. The first item is a lease amendment with Blade Urban Air Mobility. It's the result of a required survey. There were some net benefits to our favor and one in favor of the tenant. The net change to the square footage results in an increase of $318 to the airport for the year. We have a contract for McFarland Johnson for $30,000. The best way I can describe this is that this is work that McFarland Johnson performed as a sub to Jacobs to remark the intersection of Gulf and the ramp and create taxi lane foxtrot to support aircraft movements to protect the newly created Spot 0. It was a bit of an accounting paper tiger. Ultimately, the work was completed, but the easiest way to build this out and have it remain grant eligible is if we treat it as a direct contract between the airport and McFarland Johnson, which would be reimbursable under the taxiway Gulf grant. We have a airline lease agreement with, I'm sorry, I do realize I'm taking these out of order a little bit. We have a airline lease agreement with Delta Airlines. They win the Golden Hat Award. They are the first to return their lease, which we always appreciate. It's a non-signatory airline agreement for $23,952 plus activity fees. We have a contract with McFarland Johnson for $81,110. This is a 3-year contract, the majority of which is for them to perform Class AB operator services, which are required for the fuel farm, underground storage tanks, as well as our vapor recovery units and permit filing for the fuel farm. Be a 3-year contract, and this is in line to a slight increase from their previous 3-year contract. We have an additional contract with McFarland Johnson for $13,450. This is an amendment to a previous task order for investigating permit requirements for the portions of lots behind the existing Toscana and Island barge leaseholds in the bunker. Based on the previous task order, we have a beneficial permitting pathway, and I believe it makes sense to develop these lots for non-aeronautical revenue. We have a request for reimbursement by Jacobs for $1,800. This is an item that was related to the winter temporary fuel farm. There was work that was missed in the scoping phase. It was performed by a subconsultant. It needed to be done. It was done well, but it wasn't billed out during the active period of the contract. However, it's my recommendation that we split the difference with Jacobs, which is why I bring the $1,800 before you. The remainder would be owed from Jacobs to the subconsultants. We also have a contract amendment, change order 7 for Lawrence Lynch for $416,871. This change order covers 2 items. The first is to install extra sections of perforated pipe to increase drainage in several swales in the original taxiway echo area. The second is to modify the grade at the runway 6 end where we've had repeated washouts. Even though the grade is within grading tolerances between recovery of the soil with the seeding mixture and the velocity of the water, it's just been a completed repeating maintenance item. Of the $416,000, however, there's a large amount of work that is potentially FAA ineligible. So we're going at risk that up to $99,000 of the work would be airport sponsor share that we would have to pay via bonding or retained earnings transfer at the end of the fiscal year. My recommendation of the commission is that this is important safety and maintenance work, and I believe it's worthy of the sponsor cost, and we will just continue to work on full eligibility with the FAA. We have a last minute item for you related to PFAS disposal. Oh, thank you. Contract. So, thank you. So 2 more that were at the last minute. We have a pending contract with Clean Harbors Environmental Services, and I did want to explain this one. As we replaced the POET systems in homes, as we connected them to the town water main, we took the position that we wanted to containerize and ship the spent resin media that contained PFAS off island to a hazardous materials landfill. PFAS is in the process of being federally regulated. So the firms that do this environmental work and this disposal work are working on their prices, working on their disposal methods. We didn't have a firm cost. Now we do. Pickup is scheduled tomorrow. Cost came in much, much higher than we anticipated. We're holding $46,000 for this disposal. The actual amount will be based on the actual weighted charge of disposal at the landfill on the mainland where it's incinerated. So we don't have a final amount and we won't know until the material is incinerated. So I am asking for your approval based on an estimate of $46,000 with the final amount will have to be determined and adjusted based on actual. And that would be billed to our PFAS capital accounts. And then the last item that I did miss was a consent for a sublease to airport gas. And this is with Kevin Deneen doing business as Nantucket Electrical Contractors. So thank you for bearing with me on that.
Thank you, Mr. Cowberg. Any commissioners have any questions, comments, or concerns? Mr. Buscarin.
Yeah, how much soil are we going to ship off island in weight or volume?
It's resin material from the point of entry treatment filter, so it isn't soil. It is, I think we were estimating 8,400 pounds of spent resin.
And we have to get this off island.
Yes, the choices are to either maintain it in drum storage over secondary containment in perpetuity, or ship it off island to a certificated hazardous materials landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? So I am going to recuse myself from the last item, so I would appreciate if we could separate all the other items except for the assent to the sublease for a vote, and then I will turn it over to Ms. Planzer for action on that item. So is there a motion?
Can I just mention that we also had the amendment number 2 for the energy building? Sorry.
Oh, don't
I
apologize.
think that
We-
got missed
thank you.
too.
It's appreciated. You don't need to apologize. Thank you. Mr. Calvert?
Thank you, Boyana. So we have a contract amendment number 2 to the terminal HVAC project. There are, I believe, 2 or 3 actuators which are a component of the geothermal system that need to be installed and programmed. Energy is on site. They have knowledge of the system, and they're in a good position to take on this work and complete it for us under the existing grant. I'm sorry, the existing appropriation.
Thank you. And with that, are there any further questions, concerns with the items listed on the current exhibit 1? If not,
It's Preston here. One
Yep.
quick item about the Clean Harbor resin. Noah, there was a email just recently that I talked to Jamie about, and we were probably going to try to ask Clean Harbor to push off scheduling for about a week or 2 so we can at least get a contract put into place and do this in the correct steps going forward, but it still would be pending. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Preston. So that item would come off of the pending leases and contracts.
Okay. All right.
so you don't want us to vote on that tonight, is what you're asking?
So the price remains the same. We were just gonna hold off on the pickup. Was initially scheduled for tomorrow, and I had asked them to kind of hold the brakes, and we're gonna evaluate because we were pushing I think that $50,000 mark.
Yeah, so given the pricing points and our contracting responsibilities, Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be that, again, given the price involved, that we delay it until the next meeting for execution.
Okay. Any further, any concerns with that from the commission? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve all the lease amendments and contract amendments and contracts accepting the Clean Harbor Environmental Services and the consent to sublease on Exhibit 1. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
motion been made and seconded? Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Uh,
Mr.
Aye.
Viscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I'm going to recuse myself and turn it over to Ms. Planzer for action on the consent to sublease with respect to airport gas.
Okay. Any questions or concerns or comments on airport gas consent to sublease from any commissioners?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent to sublease.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Planter votes aye.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to pending matters. Item 8, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Carberg.
Thank you. For the capital approval process, the home rule petition, we reached out to town to ensure the procedural steps are in place. But the reality is, we'll need to wait on this until after the current ATM cycle. We'll keep it warm, however. For the per and fluoroalkyl substances, aka PFAS investigation update. There is an activity report in your packet. We are still at 540 samples taken from 80 individual wells. Regarding MJPN 11 Amendment 2, the major status items are the downgrading property status and potentially productive aquifer exclusion. Work is ongoing on both of these. We still expect a draft document for internal review later this month. For Amendment 3, the national sample backlog continues, and if it continues much longer, we'll have to see if it impacts our ability to define a spring scope of work for sampling. Again, this is a national level issue. A lot of entities are interested in PFAS samples. They're difficult and expensive to run, and the labs who can do this are well backed up at this point. IRA status report number 13 is due to Mass DEP by the end of this month, the 28th of February. We're expecting a third draft document for internal review this month. Weston Solutions has reported out that they have reviewed the transducer data download for August. August is the peak water use condition on islands, and they found no evidence of groundwater pumping from the airport to the neighborhood west of the airport, which means that taking homes off of wells has not shifted the plume west. McFarland Johnson is on site this month and working with the homeowner on Matacasham Valley Road to connect their home to the water main. The airport gas stormwater improvements are complete, and we're waiting on as-builts. Then for annual town meeting warrant articles, staff has reviewed the annual town meeting warrant for articles related to airport funding and any other interests. I don't think there's anything remarkable on this list, but we'll continue to track up to and through ATM. Be prepared to speak on it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on any of those matters? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 9, which is discussion regarding Hangar 8. Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you. So my intention for this item is to introduce it and then come back 2 or 3 months from now with a more detailed description, pro, cons, and some recommendations for the commission's consideration. A handout is in your packet for reference. I am finding that on my own item now. Okay, so beginning on page 129 of the packet, there's an aerial of Hangar 8. It is the old Cape and Islands freight hangar. It was historically used as a combination freight operation for our Part 135 carriers for a number of years. It has access, next picture on page 130 is the landside access. 12-foot roll-up door, similar 12-foot roll-up door on the airside access. I believe this ramp is 20 to 25 years old for the pavements, probably 4 inches of mix. Detailed 2,500 square foot metal building, 2,200 foot lot. The interior is made up of a small office space and restroom, which is heated, a customer service area, and then storage space. Vehicle parking is 80 feet by 60 feet. Aircraft parking size would have to be determined by survey. And then the general potential use categories are aeronautical, non-aeronautical, and airport use. So for an aeronautical use, it could be potentially modified to an aircraft hangar. It could be used for tenant ground storage equipment, or it could be used for an expanded existing freight operation. Non-aeronautical uses could be any sort of commercial business, such as an auto shop, a landscape shop, or it could be retained for airport use, storage for our own ground service equipment or snow removal equipment, overflow office space, or another use we may not have considered yet. It's an item where all of these strategies are open to the commission's discretion and consideration. And staff will put more information together for you in a couple months. Any
Thank you.
questions on Hangar 8?
No, thank you, Mr. Carberg. Any commissioners have any thoughts or comments? With the proposed uses under consideration or options? And I do see we have a member of the public, Mr. Hagedorn. Would you like to speak on the matter?
Yeah, I would. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Noah, hello. So I'm currently renting on a month-by-month Hangar 8, and I just completed Hangar 10. I do want to compliment you guys. I do a lot of flying. I'm an owner-operator flying a Citation mostly out of Hangar 10, and we're in there a lot. You got a great airport, and you guys have been super welcoming, and building there, while not super easy being on an island, it's a real pleasure. And Tom and Noah were great, and everybody on the airport has been fantastic. So that's that. You know, I've told Tom and Noah recently that you know, I'd like to continue to use that structure, and I'd like to see it in the aeronautical use, and I'd be willing to modify that hangar to put some of my smaller airplanes in there. I've got a bunch of airplanes that I'd like to keep an airplane based on Nantucket or my helicopter. So I just really wanted to compliment you guys on a great airport and express an interest in entering into an aeronautical sort of long-term use of Hangar 8. It's could be a really great hangar, I think. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you for your comments. We'll certainly take them under advisement, as well as the options that you know, Mr. Carver is going to put before us. I can speak in just for myself. My hope is also, I think, to maintain an aeronautical use, but you know, that's not a final decision. We need to have all the information, but I do think that there are, when it comes to the operation of the airport and supporting, you know, general aviation as much as possible, it doesn't always, the decision shouldn't solely be a financial one, should also be mission orientated. And I think that you know, that sounds, it's great to know that we've got a tenant like yourself interested, and make sure that we go about it, you know, following whatever legal and fair processes need to happen. But certainly appreciate you know, you expressing the interest in us and making us aware of that, you know, which may help us come to a decision one way or another in terms of the direction to go with that hangar, which we'll have on an agenda for a future meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Any other commissioners have any other comments on that?
No.
It looks like we'll stand by, and Mr. Carberg put together some more, you know, fine tune that a little bit, and then we'll come to have further public deliberation on that matter.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, sounds good. Thanks again, Mr. Hagedorn. And with that, we'll move on to the revised terminal airline tenant rates and charges revisions for the ramp fee phase-in period policy, Mr. Carberg.
Thank you. For your review and approval, we have a policy revision. This would update the 2022 era policy where we phased in the then increases to the ramp fee over 5 years, noting that a one-time fee increase could be disruptive to tenants, similar to our fair market value policy. I have a one-page introduction letter on page 134 of the packet. Page 135 is the table that would update the existing policy with the changes in red. believe it's appropriate to ask for your review and adoption since the rates do change to an existing policy.
Are there any questions or concerns?
Mm.
I don't know that we need a formal vote on that, or do you feel like that we do, Mr. Carberg?
My impression is we do as a matter of policy, which the commission usually approves.
Is there a motion to adopt the policy as drafted?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're on to finance. Mr. Carberg?
Thank you. So again, I want to recognize Jamie Sansbury's work on all of the finance items. I'm just here to take credit for a smooth operation and one that is doing well for the airport. On January 28th, I presented the fiscal year 24 budget to the FinCom. I think it was a well-received presentation with a number of insightful comments. There are two items I wanted to relate back to the commission. I was asked about the general health of the airport and the repayment schedule for the subsidy for the town. For your review, the Airport Commission traditionally votes to transfer a principal amount of $235,000 annually to the town, in addition to any in-kind services for excess stockpiled materials we might have, such as soil or pavement millings. In fiscal year 2022, the commission made an additional principal transfer of $500,000. The current balance, assuming our typical $235,000 transfer at the end of fiscal year 23, will be $1.4 million, with a payoff expected in fiscal year 2029. And of course, any additional in-kind services, additional transfers will accelerate that repayment. I wasn't asked by the FinCom to bring the idea to you formally, but I do believe it is something that the town is interested in, given the health of the airport, if this is an item they would consider accelerating. I was also asked about available land and land developments. And while I did relate our current inventory of shovel-ready, permittable land in both the bunker area and Sun Island Road, I also called out the 10 or 12 acres in the bunker area that could be available for future development. But of course, that strategy, it's not shovel-ready, permitted land. And that strategy would be subject to the commission's direction and intention for the airport. Moving on to capital projects, budget updates. In your packet on page 136 is the final fiscal year 24 capital budget for annual town meeting. Just due to timing, this is also presented to the FinCom and the Select Board. But my understanding is this has been an item previously discussed and developed with the Airport Commission. We have 11 projects. 3 of these are AIP projects with anticipated funding splits of 90% funded by the FAA, 5% by Mass DOT Aeronautics, and 5% locally. So we're asking for $22,680,000 for the South Ramp expansion. This is an addition to our original authorization of $15,250,000 approved in fiscal year 22. We have $5,040,000 for the runway 24 high-speed exit taxiway. Recently, this was deprioritized by the FAA following our capital improvement plan meeting. I've discussed with air traffic control and staff, and I recommend we keep moving ahead and bring this project back again to the top of our list. It's one that air traffic control has been asking for 20 years, and I believe is sorely needed for the explanations we've given before related to runway capacity and the long distance available currently between the end of the runway and Delta. We have $1 million for perimeter road relocation. We have a 4th AIP-like project which utilizes bill money, which is similar to AIP. We are requesting $9 million in supplemental funding to the original $8 million request, and we are assuming a 70% eligibility split. Terminals are a little bit different than other AIP projects. Not all spaces tend to be eligible. We then have 7 airport-funded projects, which we will compete where applicable for ASMP funding. We have $3,885,000 for supplemental funding for the crew quarters, 1.2 million for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, which would benefit ground service equipment, aircraft, and automobiles. $96,000 for jet tank repainting, $503,000 for paint beads and markings. $110,000 for a combined project for replacement of Airport 15, repainting the parking lot, and luggage cart purchases. Airport 15 was purchased in 2013 and will be traded in. $384,000 for a new Electro tug, and $392,000 for a new ARF truck and decontaminating Airport 3 after a changeover to a fluorine-free, i.e. non-PFAS containing foam. Are there any questions on those capital item requests?
Seeing none. Would you want to vote to formally adopt those items? Or it's just informational?
I believe that this is just done informationally, as this is developed over several year course with the commission.
That's been my recollection. I just wanted to check in with you. Okay. Anything further on finance questions? Okay, moving on, Mr. Coburg.
We have the second quarter report for fiscal year 23. I'm moving to the summary sheet on page 140 of the packet. There are 2 items that jump out at me for which I think Tom and Jamie both deserve credit. The first is that we've made our revenue budget in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And 6 months in, we are at 50% of expenses. So I think credit is well deserved by Tom and Jamie, but there are also some second level items that I believe urge some caution. And these are that expenses are outpacing revenue growth, 78% versus 29% respectively. Couple notes on that. We're still reflecting an anomaly in payroll expenses. We used the CARES Act reimbursement for payroll in fiscal year 22, which ended up being shown as a reduction in expenses, whereas quarter 3 of fiscal year 23 shows true payroll expenses. On the other side of that, the annual Barnstable County retirement payment has not been withdrawn yet, as it was in calendar year 2022. And that the major driver of our increased revenue is fuel sales and fuel sale overflow into operating. However, as you've noted, and we'll see in stats, operations continue to decrease. There is only so much capacity for the airport to continue realizing increases in fuel revenue based on the change in operations and increasing load factors. For GA operations especially, GA is always notable that it tracks with economic indicators, including GDP, which we'll have to watch closely. The other caution that I urge is our expenses will continue to accrue while the best revenue quarters are behind us. The main driver of expenses is the price of fuel, which is incredibly volatile. And we are experiencing operational and maintenance increases, which we attribute to inflation, especially when we created this budget 18 months ago. And we've seen quarterly increases of 6, 7, 8% in inflation. This does have an impact on our expense budget. Are there any questions on the reports?
No.
Seeing none. Thank you very much, and yourself as well as Jamie. Much appreciated, recognized, noticed. Moving on to discuss in-person, hybrid, and remote meeting alternatives, Mr. Coburg.
The current remote meeting deadline is March 31st. I don't have any information yet on if the state anticipates this law will be extended. So at this time, it leaves the commission with 2 potential options. The community room is not available on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. If the commission wants to meet there, they would have to find a different day and time for those meetings. Otherwise, if the commission wanted to continue to meet at 5 p.m. on the second Tuesday of every month, excuse me, it would have to be one half of the trailer at 131 Pleasant Street. Hopefully we'll have more information for you at the March commission meeting, but you may have to make a decision at that point.
Okay, we'll keep this on the agenda for next month, please. We'll plan on staying remote for March. And then we can probably explore, discuss it as a commission, understanding what alternatives are going to be then. Anyone have anything else on that? All right, move on to the manager's report, please.
So for the manager's report, thank you for advancing the work with Jacobs and Lynch for Taxiway Echo. Our next step would be to move forward and schedule a standard pre-construction meeting. The airport master plan continues. The aerial survey will be flown shortly. We've identified the TAC membership. We're finalizing the forecasts. No update on geometry projects. Taxiway Golf, we will be splitting the phases, with phases 1 to 3 occurring this spring. Those are the phases from the 15N northeast to the 2-4 run-up. And in the fall, phases 4 to 5, which will be on the south or ramp side of runway 1533, will be conducted. I'll have a pre-construction meeting in March. The HVAC project is nearing substantial completion. The southwest ramp extension is still upcoming. We're communicating with the engineer to make sure they're including the correct scope items, including the ones the commission has specifically asked for: lighting, emissions, and noise. Just a reminder, there will be some split eligibility on items for this project. No change for runway 624. For terminal optimization, the OPM is on board and reviewing and working on scope materials. No update on the South Shore fence or the ARC truck index change. For non-AIP projects, for crew quarters, the OPM and the engineers are working on scope and fee for construction. No change on hangar developments or the Surfside Area Transportation Group. For lightning arresters, McFarland Johnson is found a subconsultant, and we're working on identifying the method for project delivery for the fuel farm. It may be a small scope of work where it's limited to them helping identify the product, and the airport would manage the electrician and the installation. We continue work on right-of-way research to extinguish some paper streets running through the airfield. And we are coordinating with the town and the High Line on the stranded passenger plan. For RFP and bid status, we are reviewing the 5 received proposals for Bunker Road 60 and 66. Proposals are due for the RFQ for planning and engineering on-call services on the 22nd of this month. We are developing documents for the quote process for ARF truck maintenance. And we will be soliciting paperwork from the engineers to advance the permitting for lots J and K, and then soliciting the RFP. For operations, we had a sprinkler head pipe leak on Saturday the 4th. I wanted to acknowledge Johnny, Gary, Chris, Ben, Dennis, Noe, and Clement for their response and mitigation. They kept this leak from becoming a disaster. A few of them were already on site and investigating a trickle from the roof before the sprinkler had let loose in the freeze and the warm up. The system was repaired and recharged within 24 hours. They mitigated a lot of damage. I plan on proceeding with a non-monetary recognition of their effort. We've identified and repaired a blocked drainage pipe at the end of the southwest ramp. It improves airport drainage, but it's an area we'll be watching. Stanley Door has completed on-site preventative maintenance and repairs on several doors in the terminal. Delta, either this week or next week, will be removing 4 old kiosks and replacing them with 2 new kiosks. We have 2 or 3 advertising tenants that will be changing over. I'll have more information when that's finalized. And we received notice from 2 new carriers or new entrants, potential entrants to the market of their interest and intent to operate at Nantucket. I'm keeping the company names privileged for now. It's not we don't have public announcements yet, but both are working collaboratively with the airport on times and ways to mitigate the impacts of their operation. I'd characterize the first operation as a 737-700 seasonal service to a regional destination, and we're working through some issues to accommodate that aircraft type, a very large aircraft for Nantucket. The other is a Part 135 non-secure terminal operation to a regional destination, and we're working through a similar but less impactful set of issues. For statistics, which are in your packet. For December, total operations are down 8% and down 11% year to date. Southwest ramps are up 4% in December. Enplanements are down 27% for December and up 2.7% year to date. Cape Air operations, Boston has a 5%, I'm sorry, Cape Air enplanements. Boston has a 5% increase in enplaned passengers. New Bedford was up 27%. Hyannis was down 80%, and the Vineyard was down 20%. Jet A gallons sold were up 16% in December and down 8% in January. 100 low lead was up 9% in December and up 34% in January. Freight was down 83% in December and is down 6% year to date. With the breakout on freight, Cape Air Freight, United States Postal Service, and FedEx are all down, but UPS was up for December. There were 0 noise complaints. And I have a bonus statistical item as a handout. For your review.
Working to share the screen on that one.
Yeah, 1 minute, please. Okay. Here we go. Okay, my apologies for the delay. So last week I shared a figure and I discussed the growth in Jet A sales and the dynamics of the market. This figure is actually one of my favorite figures. And I always look forward to updating it each year, but the boat stats aren't out quite yet, but I'll do that as soon as they are. But it's a history and it's the implications of the passenger choice of mode of transport to the island. And what the graph represents is the relative market share of commercial boat passenger traffic versus commercial air transport to and from Nantucket. And what it shows is the market share, not total enplanements, but as you can see, the airport has traditionally been from a 30% market, fought its way to even strength with the boats for a little over a decade, and then it's dropped back off and retained sort of a historical normalcy. So, but this period from about 1997 to 2008 was a period where air traffic passenger traffic was about equal to boat passenger traffic, and this is characterized by 3 carriers operating at multiple Nantucket to Hyannis sections, and I like to call this the golden decade. After the golden decade, though, there's been a steady decline based off of declining Part 135 viability and the evolution of fast ferry service. It bottomed out in 2016 and began seeing some steady growth again, excepting a COVID year due to the growth in regional air carrier service. that's the statistical portion. There's a part of it where I look at it and I say, well, what does this mean? And I step away from stats, and which is rare for me. I love my stats, but I think about insight and feeling. And I always hear two repeated items from longtime Islanders when I meet them, and they hear that I work at the airport. And they like to say, oh, I remember when everyone flew, and it doesn't seem like anyone uses the airport anymore. And I think that's a useful perspective with some important elements of truth. I would first note that the airport captures the same percentage of trips that it did prior to the golden decade, 33% in ending 2020, ending 2022, and 33% ending 1991. But this golden decade time period, I think it's an important part in our residents' identification of the airport's value. And I plan to get more into details of the Part 135 market itself next meeting. Obviously, people still use the airport, and we've evolved over the last decade. But in all likelihood, we are a seasonal and visitor-heavy gateway to the airport, much more than before. People's instincts here, I think, are in line with reality. I don't have specific passenger origin data to prove this out, but it's something that feels right. The question that I have, and it's a rhetorical one, is, well, what do we do about this? What do we do about this item, which is both statistics, and it's both about insight and feelings? And it's not necessarily for today, but as we move forward and we talk about the actions that we take to retain and develop air service and develop the associated facilities, I always want to make sure as the manager that these facilities align with the leadership's vision for the airport and the airport's role in the community. And there's a quantitative aspect to this, and it's, well, what indicators do we use to judge performance? Because just judging operations and enplanements don't necessarily tell the whole story. We could work to develop indicators. They might be a target market share or target enplanements by region, whether that's local, whether that's local to the Cape, whether it's local to Boston, Metro New York. And then it's also qualitative, and this is harder. It's, how do people feel about the airport? How do year-round residents feel about the airport versus visitors? And there are ways to get at those metrics. And it's something possibly for a future discussion. So I know I get really excited talking about statistics. Are there any questions on that graph or the points I related?
Commissioners? Well, very interesting, and appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Exactly.
Personnel report?
Personnel. I would like to welcome Preston Planzer as our new full-time maintenance 1 role. The only problem with his hiring is now we have to replace a good seasonal worker. We received a resignation from our new administrative assistant. We now have the position advertised with interviews to follow soon. We interviewed for an open operations position, had a great candidate, made an offer, and then had that candidate lose contact with us. I don't know if it was for another position or if it was due to housing. So we will continue to advertise that position and try to staff it as soon as possible. The maintenance mechanic position remains unfilled. We have the environmental coordinator position drafted and is in the on deck position. And then I wanted to relate to the commission. My intention, I believe we have a very well qualified person on staff. I intend to extend an offer for them to assume the role of assistant airport manager that I vacated when I took this position. I'd like to make an offer to this person probably for the end of this week. Going to make sure if the commission had opportunity to ask any questions. Otherwise, I will be proceeding with that offer.
Commissioners, any questions or I would say concerns? If not, also please feel free to reach out to Mr. Carberg independently as always as well.
And that
Any other
concludes my report.
comments or questions on the personnel report?
No.
Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Carberg. Move on to commissioner comments. Any commissioners have any comments for items that were on the agenda or for future agenda items?
No.
Seeing none. Public comment, any, don't see any other members of the public. Raise your hand. I don't see any. And with that, thank you all. We will, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session per general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes as enumerated on the agenda, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the airport commission, and to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all.